Don't touch my.
Welcome to this week's episode of Who'scussion. For part A this week, we have a wonderful interview with Paul Scones there. Paul, I'll just get you to say hello to the cast, if that's okay.
Hello.
Hello there. So Paul is a very successful Whovian in his own right. He's also the author of the comic strip Companion, 1964 through to 79, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
That is correct. So we've got him on the panel today. Must say I've got butterflies in my stomach, first time in a while. And again, I've got the wonderful Harriet Skelly with me. And for the first time in Who'scussion, we will be actually using our actual names. So I'll get it right off the ticket. And Harriet Skelly, take it away with our first question.
All right, Mr. Scoons, Paul.
Hello.
We've got a list of questions here.
Sure. Fire away.
I'd start with basically probably the most pertinent question is why Doctor Who? Why did you get interested in that in the first place?
Oh, that's a big question, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
I first watched Doctor Who when I was 6 years old, and I've kind of been obsessed with it ever since. And I kind of, although I first encountered Doctor Who on television, I really got obsessed with it for collecting the Target books, the novelizations of the TV stories, and they made me a reader and a writer. I wouldn't have said I was necessarily that much interested in reading or writing before I discovered the Doctor Who books, and so they became this sort of all-consuming passion for me, and they taught me how to read proper books rather than just picture books, if you know what I mean. And only being 7 years old when I discovered the books. And so I credit Doctor Who with making me interested in history and writing, all sorts of things. So it's been an all-consuming passion for me over the years. I love Doctor Who unconditionally, shall we say?
Oh, well, that's good. I must echo that, because I actually got into Doctor Who with the Target novels as well, because I grew up during the wilderness years, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
So I was born actually a month after survival ended.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I was the wilderness years child, and I grew up with the Target novelizations as well, which my mother introduced me to Who, which is quite interesting because she's like not very the science fiction-y type, but she loves her some Who, and so she got me interested through the Target novels, and I fell in love with Spearheads from Space, which I believe is called the Auton Invasion in the Target novels.
Yeah. So which is the first story you can remember watching?
The first story I can remember watching is my mother managed to hire out a VHS of Day of the Daleks.
Right.
And I absolutely loved Day of the Daleks. I have seen the special edition, but I've got a soft spot in my heart for the original version where there's only 2 Daleks outside that house.
3 Daleks, yeah.
And I'm just like, yep, that's one heck of a force. That's interesting to have it the Target novels, and I'm much the same. The Target novels are why I fell in love with reading. And I would have been around about the same age as well. Probably a little bit older, actually. I think I was about 9 when I started reading the Target novels. That's awesome to know that the Target novels have done that, because from what I've heard, Mark Gatiss was much the same, falling in love with the Target novels.
I think the important thing to understand about them is that for people of my age, I'm 48 now, so I grew up in the 70s and 80s. We didn't have VHS, we didn't have DVD, so you could watch Doctor Who on broadcast, and then you had your own memories of it. You couldn't just go back and re-watch over and over again. You got the one viewing, and if you missed that, you'd missed it, So having the Target books was the best you could have in terms of having a permanent record that you could read over and over again. Modern generation would just sit down and watch the DVD repeatedly, but back then you had the books, and they became almost like the default record of the series. So when the VHSs became available later on, and then obviously later the DVDs, sometimes it was a bit disconcerting because your memories might be of reading the book over and over again, and then you go, hold on, that's not quite how it is, because sometimes the books aren't the same, of course.
Yeah, exactly. I found that with a couple. It was just like I was like, that didn't happen in the book.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because the show came first. But I'll swing that into my next question here.
Sure.
I've wanted to know this for a long time, and it's good to always ask a historian of Doctor Who like yourself. Is there such a thing as canon?
Well, I mean, canon is a word that has been, I think, very distorted by Doctor Who fandom. Initially, it's something that grew out, if I remember rightly, out of Sherlock Holmes fandom, and the argument was with the Sherlock Holmes stories was, is canon the stories that were written by Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, or do you also include in as official stories the ones that have been written by other people? And the general consensus was that true Sherlock Holmes canon was only Conan Doyle's work. And so that's kind of the purist view. And so for me, the purist view, applying that to Doctor Who, is that it is the broadcast television stories that is the Doctor Who canon.
Oh, I see.
But this is a matter of, personal interpretation, I believe, too. So if you want to say, hey, I accept that the comic strips or the Big Finish audios or the New Adventures or whatever you want to include in that, you regard those as official Doctor Who. You regard those as actually having happened to the Doctor, and they are part of his ongoing, adventures. That's fine. I'm not going to argue with anyone over that. So I think canon, like I say, is one of those things that you really have to take your own personal stance on it.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Does that answer the question?
It does indeed, actually. I think that's probably the best answer I could have actually asked for it, really. I'll whip it back through to Harriet Sally there, so I'll get you to go ahead and ask the next question if you can.
Well, actually, before I do that, I'd like to state that is actually that actually works pretty good for us, because we here on the show have our own personal saying, which is that's who'scussion canon, and saying that we're allowed to have our own personal canon does make it a much easier thing to go by, rather than having to include 50 years.
It avoids a lot of arguments, doesn't it?
Yes. There is a lot of stuff. Not even going into Lungbearer. Anyway, next question is how can you give an explanation to how exactly you discovered the lost episode, The Lion?
Oh, sure. That dates back to 1999, so we're going a fair way back now. And a friend of mine, Neil Lambis, really deserves the main credit for this. Neil was a member of the Doctor Who fan club with me, and he had for years been convinced that there were missing episodes out there, and he'd remembered possibly seeing some when he was at school, and he had all these theories, and when someone says this sort of thing to you over and over again over the years, and you kind of think, well, after a while it kind of like that cry wolf thing. Not to say that Neil was wrong, just that simply he'd been saying a lot without any evidence. So it was when Neil rings me up and goes, Paul, I think I found a missing episode. Do you want to meet up and go and see it? And you can imagine my immediate reaction was kind of like, okay. But I was keen to catch up with Neil anyway. So, and what had happened was that Neil had heard from another friend of his, Cornelius Stone, that a friend that Cornelius knew, called Bruce Grenville in Auckland, was a film collector, and he happened to have a film print of a Doctor Who episode. And so Neil heard about this Doctor Who episode, and from the details he'd heard, he thought it might be a missing one. So he'd arranged for Bruce to go around and see him, and Neil invited me along because I had a car and I also had a video camera, and he'd arranged for Bruce that would actually sit there and video it. Because bear in mind, at this point, we didn't know if we'd ever be able to borrow it. So we thought this might be the only time we'll get to see it.
Right.
So we went round there, and I still didn't know if it was going to be a missing episode, obviously. And most of the time when someone says, I've got a missing episode of Doctor Who, it turns out to be false, right? That's the default position. So we went around there, and it turned out that he had an episode of The Crusade, which was, The Lion, which was the first episode of the story, and was missing from the BBC. So you can imagine our enormous excitement of having found a missing episode in New Zealand. That sort of etched in my brain as this moment of realization and going, oh my goodness. So the two things that went through my head at that point was A, this is groundbreaking stuff. This
Mm.
is really, really important to Doctor Who. And B, not knowing Bruce Grenville very well, what his reaction was going to be to that. Because he could have gone one of several ways, right? Because the moment you tell someone who thinks, because Bruce didn't know it was missing.
Right.
Bruce just thought it was a Doctor Who episode that everyone had. He did not realise its importance. So I was concerned, as was Neil, that the moment we tell Bruce this, that he might go, "Oh, I've got something really valuable. No one's ever going to get to see it." That could have been the way he went. That was a real risk. So we were fortunate that Bruce was agreeable to, after some negotiation, which I took care of, that Bruce was agreeable to the BBC borrowing the film on the condition that they let Bruce have it back. So, which they did. So I took care of sending it back to the BBC and then returning it to Bruce.
That's incredible. Well, us as the Whovian community, we are forever indebted for that being returned. So thank you and the team there for all of that, Paul. That's incredible.
Yeah, I wish we could have found more.
yeah, imagine that. If you could find Marco Polo, that'd be great.
The thing that always bugs me about The Lion is that from everything we've learned is that it was part of a huge consignment to film prints. And when I say a huge consignment, I mean all sorts of television programs. I'm not talking a huge consignment of Doctor Who here, but a huge consignment of film prints which were dumped in a Wellington landfill, right?
Right.
Because they were taking up space in a Wellington film store. So it's kind of like no one wanted them back at the time. This is the 1970s we're talking about. And it's simply that a film collector in Wellington heard about the dumping and arranged with whoever was doing the dumping to actually just take some away and basically say, "You didn't see me, I didn't take these," type thing. It was sort of like an under-the-counter type sort of deal. And he was only able to take a number of these film cans. I think he took about 100 out of however many they were dumping. It was a small portion of it. So he just grabbed what he could, right? And they dumped the rest. So the fact we've got one episode of The Lion, it's almost certain that the other 3 episodes, of which 2 are missing, were in that dumping.
Wow.
So that bugs me.
Doctor Who's got his very own ET, the buried.
I know. The reality is that they would not have survived the landfill.
I see.
There's no point in digging up. There's no way that film would survive being buried and then dug up again. It doesn't have that. It needs to be kept under good condition. So no, if they did find it, it would be completely destroyed.
I've always found that so sad that we didn't invent the VCR earlier.
Yeah,
because BBC would have made a killing from Doctor Who, which in a way I'm happy because that means that we got the novels instead. So you got to really take one with the other, because I love Terence Stick's works on the novel and Anthony and Marta. So it's really good, and for Pip Baker to do renditions as well, which is always great. But I'll move on to our next question here. You were the editor for one of the most popular fanzines of Doctor Who. Are you able to tell us about the inception of TSV, the Time Space Visualizer?
Sure. I always wanted to do a Doctor Who fanzine. In fact, I did one when I was at high school called Gallifrey, which was only read by a handful of my school friends. So I was really putting a lot of effort in for very little reward, if you know what I mean. And when I got, when I got to university, I was hoping that there would be a Doctor Who club there because I'd heard about in the UK how there were congregations of Doctor Who fans at various universities in the UK, and I was quite disappointed that not only was there not a Doctor Who club at Auckland University, but also that the Sci-Fi club there, which is quite well established, had no interest in Doctor Who whatsoever. I went along to one of their meetings, and
that's crazy. A science fiction club that didn't like Doctor Who.
They were very much into proper sci-fi, as in Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke and all this sort of thing, and which is fine. I like that stuff too. I'm a sci-fi reader. I read a lot of sci-fi books, but the fact that they were so dismissive of someone who was actually interested in Doctor Who was a bit disconcerting. So what I did was I put a notice up on the Sci-Fi Club notice board saying anyone interested in Doctor Who would you like to, get in touch, and gave my contact details. And I had one reply, and that was a guy called Paul Sinkovich, another Paul. And we met up, and I basically bombarded Paul with my enthusiasm for the show and basically said, "This is fantastic." I've been wanting to meet know because I didn't know any other Doctor Who fans at the time.
Oh, wow.
I'd grown up being a Doctor Who fan all by myself. I had school friends who would watch it with me. That's fine, but they weren't interested in any other aspect. They weren't target collectors. They weren't obsessed with Doctor Who like I was. So I couldn't really talk to anyone else about my interest in Doctor Who. They'd kind of like,
I know that feeling all too well.
Yeah. So I'd spent the best part of a decade as a very lonely Doctor Who fan. So to actually meet someone who was as obsessed about Doctor Who that I was just a revelation. So Paul and I would just meet up at university all the time. He'd loan me videotapes, which was fantastic because New Zealand was way behind on Doctor Who at the time, so I got to see these new stories I'd never seen before.
Wow.
And I persuaded Paul that we really ought to unite Doctor Who fandom around New Zealand and do a fanzine, because there wasn't any Doctor Who fandom in New Zealand whatsoever. There was no organised fandom. It was just a bunch of people that Paul had established pen pal contacts with. He'd been a member of the Australian fan club, and he'd written to people who had written in from New Zealand saying, "I want to be a pen pal in New Zealand." So he'd made contact with a number of people, like, for instance, Warwick Gray, who now works on Doctor Who magazine as Scott Gray, and all these people around New Zealand. We were all kind of spread out in Dunedin, Christchurch, Auckland, all over the place. And I thought, well, let's do a fanzine that we can do by mail order, and that way we can all write for it and draw for it and everything. So that's how TSV came about in 1987. That would have been that we started it. So that's predating you, Floyd, I'm afraid.
No, that's okay. That would have been, I believe that would be Collins last year, if I'm not mistaken.
Sylvester's first year.
Yes. Was at Time of the Rani, right?
Yeah. When we started doing TSV, Time of the Rani had screened. It was between Patrick Troughton dying in March that year and Sylvester McCoy's first story screening later that year that we started TSV. So that's the time period that we got going in.
Right. Okay. Oh, I believe is TSV going to is there going to be another issue?
I very much doubt it, to be honest. I put the feelers out there, but I think everyone's just sort of they like to publish instantly online these days. I think that fanzines, unfortunately, have gone the way of the ghost. They're just sort of there's no market for them anymore. Even overseas, there isn't much in the way of Doctor Who fanzines anymore. There's a lot of Doctor Who fan communities out there. There's podcasts like yourself. There's websites. There's forums. So there's lots of opportunities for people to be very creative with Doctor Who. But I don't think fanzines are quite the way that people are going these days. So I think TSV is kind of a product of its time. And I think when you look at TSV, the advent of the internet and Doctor Who websites, I think you can see the slow decline. TSV gets further and further apart between issues. It got to the point where we're only doing one a year because it just wasn't the material to coming in to put it out more frequently. I mean, because TSV ran for 22 years, something like that.
Yeah, because the last TSV issue which I have is it's David Tennant and Donna Noble on the front covers. That would be in Series 3, I believe.
Yeah, probably. Or was it Martha? Was it Martha or Donna? I can't quite remember. I think it was about 2000. I mean, I think you're right. No, Donna. The last thing I wrote for TSV was just after the announcement that Matt Smith had been cast. So that's how long ago it was.
Oh, well, it's a sad day indeed, but I thoroughly enjoyed it myself. I got into
yeah,
99, I think.
Mm-hmm. How did you find out about TSV?
I actually bumped into this woman who I cannot remember the name of, unfortunately. And I bumped into her at this book sale thing. It was like a gala, and she was just like, "Oh, hey, I see you got a Doctor Who," and I was about to get Carnival of Monsters for $1. And I was just like, "Yes, I've got Carnival of Monsters. Can't wait to read this." And she was like, "Oh, you're interested in this? Here's some TSVs." And I was just like, "What's that?" And then I got introduced to it, and that was me for quite a while. I really enjoyed TSV. Wow. It was great.
A chance encounter.
Yeah, exactly. That happens a lot with Doctor Who, though. I find.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just like you're like people are like, oh, you like Doctor Who? I'm just like, no, I love Doctor Who. So I'll hand
Don't understate it.
I'll hand the next question over to Harriet Skelly there.
All right. So next question, follow-up question for that, I guess, is you also do stuff for a company called Retrospace, which is a sci-fi collectibles website. Yes.
Retrospace is my wife's shop. It's a we sell sci-fi merchandise, mostly toys, statues, books, DVDs, games, anything sci-fi, t-shirts, posters, the lot, anything sci-fi memorabilia. And it started out. My wife Rochelle, we've both been in retail for many years. Used to work for Wetcalls and other companies like that, and Rochelle wanted to start her own business, and so she just decided to do it as an online store first of all. Started off in Trade Me, and then got her own website built, which is obviously retrospace.co.nz. And she was running it out of our garage at home. And so basically people would order online, and she'd go down to the garage, package up the items and send them out to people. And we had a number of people who wanted to come around and see what we had in person. They wanted to touch and feel stuff. And it got kind of irritating. People would be knocking on the door at 8 o'clock at night or something, going, "Oh, I want to see what you've got." So I thought, it's silly. We've got to start a shop. We've got to open a shop because people want to sort of come around and see stuff, and you don't really want to come around to your house all hours at night. So we started a shop in Takapuna, where we live in Auckland, and it's just grown from there. And the shop opened about 4 years ago now, and it's just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And the website's still going. We still send stuff all over the world, and it's quite a successful business. We were open 7 days a week, so we've got a couple of staff members who work for us, and so it's like I say. It's my wife Rochelle's business, but I do a lot of the stuff for her. I do most of the website stuff for her.
Of course, I do. I appreciate the website itself. It's fantastic, considering I also am a sci-fi
thank you.
and generally other enthusiast. So I do like it. I'm also extremely glad that I see that Doctor Who is listed heavily on it as well.
Absolutely.
But, yes. So you say that it started around 4 years ago. Since then, you guys have been doing convention circuits as well. Yeah.
Yeah. It's Armageddon. Armageddon, which is the obviously the. Do I need to explain what Armageddon is?
Yeah, no,
it's New Zealand's version of Comic Con, and that it's held in various cities around New Zealand about 5 times a year, once a year in each main centres, and we've been involved with it for many years now. Bill Gerards, who's the owner and organizer of Armageddon, started out doing Doctor Who video days for the Doctor Who fan club when I was running it.
Oh wow!
And he was a TSV contributor, and so Bill was running these video days, and this would have been in the wilderness years in the early 90s, and he was getting steadily frustrated that there was no new Doctor Who to screen at these things. So you'd put on an old Doctor Who story, and some people would sit down and watch it, and most people were just getting like sort of just sit around and talk. So Bill would start putting on stuff that wasn't Doctor Who. So you'd like latest episodes of Star Trek Voyager or Stargate or something else that he got him from overseas, and people go, "Oh, this is something I haven't seen." So he was starting to get a much bigger audience coming onto these Doctor Who video days to see Star Trek or whatever the latest thing was. So it stopped really being about Doctor Who, and so he kind of drifted away from doing, a Doctor Who club events, and he started holding them in a church hall and then a larger venue, and he started having comic sales, and so it became Armageddon out of him originally doing Doctor Who club events for me.
Wow, that's incredible.
So that's awesome.
So Armageddon. If you've been along to an Armageddon in recent years, you'll know how huge they are now. They're vastly outgrown their origins, and Rochelle and I obviously want to promote Retrospace. So we've for many years now have had a stand at each Armageddon, and we just take along a selection of the stuff that we sell in the shop and hand out flyers and sell stuff at them. So it's just a way of getting our name out there, particularly to other parts of the country. When we go down to Christchurch, for instance, there aren't many sci-fi shops in Christchurch, especially post-Quake. Obviously, there isn't much retail down there at all. So we do really, really well. It costs us a lot, obviously, to take our stock down to Christchurch, but when we get down there, we're really well received and we sell a lot because there's so few opportunities for Christchurch fans to buy stuff that, they go, hey, fantastic, you're right here. And it means, obviously, we get back to Auckland and we start to see increased sales on our website because we've been down there and we've told them about us. So it's worth us doing Armageddon.
Oh, definitely. Your storefront, Retrospace, is pretty much the only way I get Classic Who, because it's so impossibly difficult to get Classic Who on DVD. I don't actually understand why, but Retrospace helps me out every Armageddon that I go to. I just go there and get.
Oh, cheers! Yeah,
I love Retrospace, and my wife loves Retrospace too.
The thing about DVD is that unfortunately it's declining. The sales have dropped right off on DVD across the board. The shops sell DVDs now. When you go into a Wickles, for instance, there's virtually no DVDs on the shelves anymore, and Blu-ray is on the way out. It's kind of everyone's sort of streaming and downloading now, and the BBC are also moving into actually doing subscription-based, selling of their programs online rather than selling physical product. So unfortunately, I think DVD in years to come will be something that people will look on like they look on VHS tapes now. It's a past format.
Yeah, which I've always found sad because I loved behind the scenes and I've come to love commentary, which is funny because I didn't like it at first, and I'm just like, this is actually great. So I'm sad that will be going because,
Yeah, this is the thing that bugs me is that, with the BBC moving to the subscription service, they don't seem to be doing that with the extra features. It's only just the episodes themselves.
Oh, that's sad.
It's a real shame. So hold on to those DVDs.
Yeah, I will do.
Surely much sought after collector's items, yeah.
Oh, the one I found the most difficult is Shada. It's so hard to find.
Oh, really?
And it was because it was released as like a limited edition set with like a convention companion, and and I found one site that had it, and I went in, and this woman was just like literally an hour ago somebody came in and bought it. And I was just like, I can't believe that.
What's it called the Legacy Box?
Yes, it was. Yeah. Just running off from our earlier question, have you ever had any weird or interesting Whovian requests at a convention?
Weird requests? What sort of thing did you have in mind?
Like has somebody ever come up to you and been all like, hey, do you have like a T-shirt about a character from like, Bloxion 7 or something, like just something so peculiar, just like, is that even a show, or is that even actually science fiction? Is that something that anybody would know about?
Yeah, it's hard to think of anything specific, but we do get some odd people.
That seems to be our community a little bit.
Maybe. There's some, there are some really nice people out there in Doctor Who fandom, but there are also some very interesting characters. But we get that's just the nature of people in general. I don't think that sci-fi fans are any more or less strange than anyone else. It's just that some people are strange. Do you know what I mean? I think that sci-fi fans come in for a bad rap from the news media in particular, that they kind of like go, oh, look at these weird people, But no, it's just some people are weird and some people aren't, and I think the percentages are the same whatever community you're in.
Yeah.
Probably if you went along to a rugby club, you'd meet some weird people there as well.
I've actually been to a rugby club and met weird people. So,
there you go. There you go. Rest my case.
With the convention bracket out of the way, I'll pass the next question on to Harriet Skelly there.
All right. The next question is about the comic strip companion. I'm just hoping you could tell us some stuff about that, its inception, how you came up with the ideas, that sort of stuff.
Well, it actually came out of TSV originally, because one of the things I always wanted to write for TSV was a guide to the comic strips, and I was hampered by the fact that it was such a huge topic to encounter that I'd have to do it as a multiple part article over many issues, and also that I didn't have all the comic strips, because the comic strips have been going since 1964, but I only had a complete run of since 1979 when Doctor Who magazine, or Doctor Who Weekly as it was then, started. So I was missing the first 50 years, if you know what I mean, of the comic strip, when it was in TV Comic, Countdown, and TV Action, which were the earlier comics that published Doctor Who strips. So I was hampered by that, and I was going, well, I can't really find these anywhere. They haven't been reprinted. And I was looking for something else. This I can tell you, this is when Torchwood was just starting. So we're looking about 2008, 2009.
Torchwood.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah, somewhere around there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think about 2007. 2007, I think, is about when Torchwood was first getting trailered, and I was looking for something to do with Torchwood, and God knows why this came up in a search result, but I found a link to, it just caught my eye, and I was Googling something, a link to a closed invite only, I think it was a Yahoo group, when these Yahoo used to have those community forum type group things, and it was for Doctor Who comic strip collectors, and I thought, oh, this sounds interesting. So I sent off to a request to join their closed group, and they accepted me, and they were basically of the idea that if they got enough people, all of whom had scattered issues, and everyone scanned their issues and all submitted them together, they might be able to build up a complete run of all the comic strips from the 1960s and 1970s. And they were really close to completing their run. And it happened that I had some of because I had some scattered issues, and I had a friend who had some of the countdowns and TV actions from the 1970s with the John Pertwee strips in them. And I realized that I could actually help them out. So I was basically saying, you give me what you've got and I'll scan some stuff for you. So we basically did a bit of a mutual exchange. Everyone was sort of helping each other out. We were building up this collection. And it got to the point where we were only missing about 2 or 3 strips.
Wow.
It was really, really close to having a complete run of however many hundred strips there were from 1964 to 1979, which was the pre-Doctor Who Weekly run. So this is really quite exciting. All these comic strips I'd never, ever seen before. And because most of them have never been reprinted since they were first published in their original issues. So at this point I was going, someone really needs to write a guide about this. So I wrote to I think Telos Publishing was the first one I talked to. David Howe and Stephen James Walker, who were TSV readers. They knew my stuff. So it was easy to talk to them because they knew who I was. And I just said, look, you guys really ought to do a comic strip guide, do so, because you've done like the Television Companion, which is basically a really excellent guidebook to all the Doctor Who's television stories. Why not do one about the comic strips? And they said, well, it's a really good idea. Why don't you put it together? So I thought, oh yeah, I should do it. So I wrote a sample chapter, which covered the first year of Tom Baker's story. So I just basically picked a sort of a middle bit. I didn't start from the beginning, and wrote that up and sent it off to them. I said, this is really good. Here's a contract. And I go, oh, I'm going to be an author.
Wow.
and so that's where it just grew from there. And originally it was just going to be an episode guide. I was just going to document all of the stories, just say what happened in each one. And as I was writing, I was thinking, no, this can be a bit dull and a bit dry. I need to give an opinion about each story. So I reviewed each story. So it got even longer, if you know what I mean. Every episode, every entry in the episode guide sort of doubled length once I'd actually started, reviewing them as well. And then while I was writing them, a friend of mine in UK, Richard Bignell, who's a Doctor Who researcher like myself, knew I was working on this book about comic strips. He got in touch and he said, I've just been to the BBC archives, the written archives, and I found this file full of comic strip related paperwork. So he scanned all that and sent it off to me.
That's so cool.
And it was a ton of documentation related specifically to the stories I was writing there. So you can imagine how that vastly expanded the book too. So a book which I thought was going to be reasonably manageable turned out to be 200,000 words long and 600 pages. And took me about 6 years to write, which just wasn't what I was expecting when I started, because I would have just gone, oh, heck.
Wow, that's That is incredible, and that comes to, like, the chance encounters, as we were talking about before, and that Doctor Who just gives that to you. You have these encounters in life where so many cool things can happen, and that's all down to our lovely time traveling alien from Gallifrey.
I think, yeah. I think the advantages that I had in that was obviously there was that chance encounter of discovering that online community, which I might have stumbled across them eventually. I don't know, but I already had all these other contacts. I knew the publishers through TSV. I knew Richard through TSV. Because I'd been running the Doctor Who fan club and I've been publishing the fanzine. I mean, TSV had a lot of overseas readers. A lot of people in the US and the UK read TSV. It got to the point with TSV where every time I'd mail out an issue, I'd separate out the local envelopes, because I post normally from the ones I needed to get overseas mailing on them, the email stickers and the larger amount of postage. Each time I do it, the piles would get more and more equal, if you know what I mean.
Wow.
So the number of New Zealanders versus the number of people from other countries, and it almost got to the point by the end TSV ended that there were more people overseas buying TSV than there were locally. So that
cool.
gives you an indication of just how many people overseas were following TSV, reading TSV, writing into me. I mean, Andrew Pixley, who's a very well-respected Doctor Who researcher, he was writing into TSV all the time and saying how wonderful it was. So to get someone like Andrew Pixley saying that really means, we must be doing a good job. So that was good endorsement. So that, in terms of what you were saying about, chance encounters, it's also about building up a reputation. And I think that I managed to do that. And so that when I would go to Talos, or I go to other people and say, hey, I'm writing a book about comic strips, they go, oh, we'd like you. We were keen on that because we know what you've done with TSV, so we believe in you. So that I think TSV comes as where it all begins.
TSV was such a wonderful magazine. I've still got all of my issues, and I'd love to collect them all one day. I knew it was somebody in Petone, actually, here in Wellington, that actually has it all, but she doesn't want to part with it. It's really frustrating.
Oh, what a shame.
I'm just like, I will buy it. She's got all of the Target novels too. I'm just like, I will buy your
Right.
entire Who collection off you right now today. And she's like, never. No.
See about Doctor Who fans, they're hoarders. They do keep onto this.
It's so very true. I've got an extremely tattered copy of the Deadly Assassin Target novel, and I still will never replace it with a brand new one.
I've probably got some spare issues of TSV still boxed up somewhere. So if you want to contact me later about which episodes, which issues you're missing, I might be able to help you out there.
Well, 87 to 99 would help quite a bit.
I know I've got quite a few from the 1990s. So obviously the 80s ones are much hard to come by, because we didn't print very many of them. Because when TSV was starting out, we only had like 20 readers or something, so there wasn't very many copies printed. But by the 1990s, we had over 200 readers, so there's a lot of copies in circulation. And every so often, someone's basically sent, like someone might have moved out of the home and left their collection behind, so their parents might go, "Oh, there's all these issues of Doctor Who fans. Do you want them back, or should I just give them to you, or bring them into the shop or something?" So we have got some back copies lying around.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm sure I can get some for you.
That's left me rather elated, I must say. That's good news indeed. And that,
I'd hope you go to a good home.
and so that brings us to our final question here, and it's kind of like
yeah.
Oh, sorry, you first, Paul.
Are we going to talk about the DVDs?
Well, yes. I was, of course. No, yeah. Take it away, Paul. So, I understand you've done a lot of content for the extra features for a lot of the classic Who run.
Well, I've been on I've been interviewed on them. So when I was in London one time, they got me into studio because I was writing the comic strip companion at the time. So they got me to studio, sat me down, and said, "Right, talk about Doctor Who comic strips." So
that was Stripped for Action, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
That's in every single one of our episodes of our podcast. We actually advertise your
oh, nice.
It's in every single episode that we do of our podcast is actually that documentary.
I'm on three of those.
Yes.
I'm on the Pertwee one, the McGann one, and the Daleks one. But they shot those back to back. It's just basically me in one long run.
I always thought it was done on different days.
no, because I was leaving the UK like a couple of days later, so they had to rush them all through. They set up a studio session especially for me because I couldn't stay any longer. I'd had flights home booked, and they only made contact with me in the last week before I left. And they're going, right, well, we definitely want to get you on, because they needed someone to talk about these comic strips. And they're going, well, since you're writing a book about it, you're an ideal person to do it. So I said a lot more on the they basically cut it in with other people. So they asked me all the same questions that they asked the other people who are on the documentaries,
right.
and then just pick the best answers.
So
if you see Gary Russell or Jeremy Bentham, whoever is on those documentaries, we've all been asked the same set of questions, but we've also got our own individual answers because we didn't know what anyone else was saying. And so when they went to cut it all together, they just go, who said the best answer to that? So they just
what's interesting about that, though, is because you guys weren't in the studio together, I like that so many of the answers echo each other as well. We're talking about it's incredible. I'm just like, wow, we're like a hive mind of Whovians. It's great.
Yeah, I know.
So watching that documentary, I rewatched it earlier this year, and that gave me the idea to want to interview you. I just had been for months trying to get the courage to ask, to be honest.
I'm just a Doctor Who fan like you,
Yeah, but you're like a superbly successful Doctor Who fan.
Yeah,
it's so cool.
I'm still just a Doctor Who fan. I might have done more, but I'm still just a Doctor Who fan. Remember?
I was just like when I messaged you the other day, I was just like, hello. I'm so scared.
It's funny because when you messaged me, and I was thinking, hold on, this is exactly what I do when I'm trying to get an interview out of someone who I really respect, who's worked on the Doctor Who comic strips, because I'm working on the second book at the moment, which covers the Doctor Who Weekly, Doctor Who Monthly from the 1980s. And so I might be emailing someone whom I've really respected for many years, and I'm a bit sort of like, ooh. So when you message me, I go, yeah, that's like I am.
I was like, seriously, I was just like, I just want to say as much as I can without coming off as too forceful.
Yeah, I know.
I want to interview him.
It's difficult, isn't it? It is difficult. Yeah.
It's so extremely difficult. And I had butterflies the entire experience. But
I thought to myself, I have to say yes because I expect everyone that I contact to say yes to me as well. So it'd be intensely hypocritical of me. Not that I would have turned you down, but that's what went through my head at the time. But the other thing I was going to say about relation to the DVDs, the other stuff I'd done with the DVDs is the same time. It was almost the same month that I got told yes, do the comic strip companions. We're talking 2007, 2008. Yeah, 2008 it was. I was working on the book. I hadn't done very much of the comic strip companion. I was still writing it. And I got an email out of the blue from a guy called Martin Wiggins, who was working on the Doctor Who DVDs at the time. And he said, in theory, would you be interested in working on the production info subtitles for the DVDs? Now, they are the subtitles that you can turn on that tell you how the story was made. So it's the subtitles that run on the bottom of the screen when you're watching the DVDs. And it's basically all very, very detailed information about what you're seeing on screen. And so it's like a technical commentary to how the story was made and all the bloopers and all the script changes and all the cast details and everything. And I was a big fan of this aspect of the DVDs. It was one of the things I made a point of watching whenever I got a new story on DVD, and I go, yeah, this is a really cool feature. So I was going, oh my God, you sure you got the right person? So I was kind of like, really? But again, Martin was someone who was a TSV reader, and he'd seen my work in TSV, and he thought, yeah, this guy could probably do it. And he was putting together a team he'd taken over the editorship of this particular feature from someone else. And he was like going, I want to put my own team together of Doctor Who experts. So he'd approached other people like Stephen James Walker, Richard Bignell, Nicholas Pegg, these fairly big names in Doctor Who fandom in the UK. And he approached me, and I think I was one of the only people, if not the only one, who was outside the UK that he wanted to have do it.
Wow.
And I thought, this is fantastic. So I was like you were saying, Floyd. It's like I was a bit hesitant at first, a bit butterflies in my stomach about taking on this really big responsibility, and because it's a hell of a lot of work. And I was like, yeah, but I could pass it up, because otherwise it'd be like, oh, that thing I could have done but didn't do, it would just eat away at you forevermore. So I had to give it a go. And it was really quite good timing, because I was about to go to the UK for a holiday at that time. And so they said, well, while you're over here, we'll give you, we'll arrange for you to go and visit the BBC archives, the written archives. This is where all the paperwork is stored for every Doctor Who story.
Wow.
And so I just went along there to Caversham and Reading, where they filmed the Logopolis scenes.
Oh.
On occasion, the bit where they're outside the radio telescope.
Yeah.
that's Caversham and Reading. It's an old BBC monitoring station, but they've now just filled it up with paperwork, which is all the old files.
Oh wow.
And so I went and sat down in a reading room there, and they just brought huge bulging manila folders full of the original paperwork with all the coffee stains and everything still on them that had been used in the 1980s for Doctor Who. These are the actual paperwork that had been handled by the production team and then filed away when they'd finished making the story. And so I just went through this, and I only had one day there, so I photographed a lot of it so I could take it away and study it in more detail. And I looked at Plant of Fire, which was the first story I worked on, and the other story that I looked at that day was Frontios. So I just spent the entire day just going through those files and making as many notes as I can. And then what they did was they sent me DVDs which had the time code along the bottom, and hours, minutes, seconds, and individual frames, because each second has 25 frames in it.
Wow.
And I had to write a subtitle script which told you exactly to the frame when a subtitle would appear on screen and when it would disappear off screen. And generally they were anywhere between 5 and 8 seconds on screen. And that you can imagine how many subtitles you generate over the course of an entire Doctor Who story if you run up every.
Especially classic Who, that's insane.
Yeah. So about 90-minute story, 95-minute story. You've got just a lot of subtitles, and I was given every version of the script they could find. So they basically give me a scan of the entire, script, whether it be rehearsal script, transmission script, camera script, draft script, whatever versions I could find, because that's really fantastic if there's lots, because it means it gives you heaps of material to comment on. So that was always my first go-to, was how many versions of the script can I find? And also, of course, any material that survived in the archives, like deleted scenes, behind the scenes stuff. And for Plant of Fire, which is the first story I worked on, they'd kept the camera running for an entire afternoon and evening of filming in studio.
Wow.
So that means that every so often they'd perform a scene, but they had all the setup as well. So basically it's like 2 or 3 hours worth of footage of them just sort of like, okay, now we're getting ready. You need to stand in that position. You need to stand in that position. We're going for a take. Okay, you fluff that line. We're going to go for another take. And it just goes on and on and on. That's fascinating, because it gives you so much material to talk about on the subtitles. And then all of the film footage as well from when they're on Lanzarote is all on there as well, including all the deleted stuff. I mean, some of that's used on the DVD and the extras, obviously, but it just means you get a better understanding of how the story was made. And so I'd have to put all this material together into a coherent script, and then deliver that, and then it would get edited, and I'd approve the edits, and then it would go to DVD. So I started doing those in 2008, and I went through to 2012, 2013, when the DVDs were coming to an end. The last one I did was Scream of the Shalka. I did 8 in total.
I love Scream of the Shalka. Richard E. Grant as the Doctor is so incredible.
Do you know the great thing about that story is that when they gave that one to me, because the problem they were having with the just to back up a little bit, the problem they were having with the stuff was that obviously the first time they offered the work to me, I was going to the UK anyway, so I could go to the BBC Written Archives and sit there and take my own notes. When they offered me later stories, I wasn't going back to the UK, so they had to find some way of getting the stuff to me. So they would have to get someone to requisition the file from the archives and either scan or photograph it all for me and email it to me. And when it got, so this was obviously an arduous piece of work for them to, have to get all scanned or photographed. When it got to Scream of the Shalka, they couldn't find the production files. So they offered it to on the understanding that there were no files. So I was the obvious choice, because it was less work for them, if you follow me. They could just go, here's the story, you've got nothing else. So that was kind of daunting, but the advantage was that I knew Paul Cornell, who wrote the story, and Paul Cornell had written the story partly in New Zealand when he was visiting me many years ago, and
Sorry to interject there.
Yeah,
Paul Cornell visited you.
yeah.
You
Yeah,
are a living legend.
Paul Cornell is another one of these TSV readers from way back. We interviewed him several times in TSV, so he's been a friend for a while. He's been a mate. So he was traveling around New Zealand with his wife. They were on their honeymoon, and they came and stayed with us for a while. This is before Scream of the Shalka. So it was about 2003, 2002. It would have been about that time. They did 2003, because I tell you what, they came along to a convention that we ran that year that had Janet Fielding as well, which was Dr. Con 2003. So there we go. That's the year. So Cornell came along to that. He was putting together the proposal for Scream of the Shalka in top secret, because it hadn't been announced at that time. And so he wrote some of it in New Zealand. And when you watch Scream of the Shalka, there are references to New Zealand in it. The opening scene is set in Tongariro National Park. That's the reason, is because he was visiting there. So he wrote in his experiences of going there. In the first drafts of the script, there are a lot more references to New Zealand that made it through to the final version of the story. One of the characters was meant to be a New Zealander, and that didn't sort of quite work out. In the very first draft of the script, two of the characters who were in the opening scene were named after myself and John Predel, who's another big New Zealand Doctor Who fan.
Wow.
So that's kind of cool. Unfortunately, they got changed in later drafts, but in the first draft they were named after us. That was nice. But so the thing was that because I knew Paul, I could go, not having any of these copies of these files, I had no material to actually do my subtitles from. I went to Paul and said, look, I've been given this story to do. What have you kept? Because obviously he wrote the story. So, hopefully he had something. Paul had kept every single draft of his scripts. Wow. So he had six very different versions of each episode. So he very kindly sent me everything he had, because he didn't have time. He was working on his book or whatever. He had no time to go through it all. So basically the agreement I had with Paul was I could use whatever he sent. He basically just zipped up a zip file of everything that he had from the story, all of his paperwork. And so he didn't know what could be public or not, you know what I mean? But he said the condition is that I had to run my finished scripts past him to get his approval. So if there was anything that's controversial he didn't want made public, that he could have veto on it, So I thought that's fair enough. So I got these versions of the scripts, and that meant I could write very, very detailed production subtitles based on these scripts, because I could say, this scene was originally set somewhere else and it had these different set of characters in it, and they said these different lines. So it basically almost wrote itself. It was a really easy set of subtitles to write, because I had so much material to work from, even though I had very little information about the production itself. Right. And so when it got to the end of it, and that butterflies and stomach moment again for you. So I sent off these scripts that I'd written to Paul Cornell, thinking, oh, heck, he's going to pull them apart, because I'm sending them to the guy who wrote the story. These are the and basically saying, what do you think? And he wrote back and he said, oh, there's a spelling mistake on that line. That was his only change. So that was a huge sigh of relief for me.
That's incredible.
So the irony was that just after the story came out, they found the production file.
That Murphy's Law.
It'd just been misfiled. So I never got to see them, but that's fine. I had so much material, I wouldn't have known where to put the extra stuff anyway, because Cornell had given me so much to work from. So that was brilliant. But I did Plan to Fire, it's the first one I did, and I did the last 5 Davison stories. I did Awakening, Frontios, Resurrection of the Daleks, Plan to Fire, and Kaiser Androzani.
I love Kaiser Androzani so much, but so many.
Oh, it was a dream to get to do that one. It was fantastic. The best Doctor Who classic story, voted top of that Doctor Who magazine poll that came out where Kaiser Androzani was voted #1, came out while I was working on the script. It's
That's
like,
cool.
yes, I'm working on the best Doctor Who story ever. That was a huge moment. And then for Colin Baker, I did Venus on Varus, and I did Dragonfire, it's Fess McCoy story, and then I did Scream of the Shalka. So 8 stories in total.
Wow. Wow, that's
Yeah,
incredible.
all 1980s. I would have loved to have done some of the 70s or 60s ones, but they because we were part of a team of, I think it was 6 or 7 of us, each doing these subtitles. They kind of like had first dibs on the 70s and 60s
I
stories,
see.
so they all snapped up. But I was regarded by that team as a sort of an 80s expert, if you like. So they kind of like, oh, it's an 80s story, get Paul in.
That's
So yeah, I was the go-to guy, particularly for the Davison stuff, because I was really keen on doing that.
Oh, I love Davison.
Davison is my favourite Doctor. So.
Oh, wow, that just answered my next question.
Oh, sorry.
No, but that's perfect, because the next question was a 3-parter anyway.
Oh yeah,
but
for it.
that's incredible, because Davison's actually my wife's favorite Doctor as well, and I love Caves of Androzani. It's just so much cool stuff happens. It's like unnecessarily cool. I'm like, you got to remember your Doctor Who. And he's just like, I'm Doctor Who, but I'm a cool story, and it's so cool.
The really cool thing about Caves of Androzani is that the Doctor is a supporting character in it.
Yeah, basically.
He's in any other story, the character that the Doctor plays would be a supporting cast member. It's someone who wanders in and something happens to them, but they're not really part of the main story. They're on the fringes, and that's really cool. That the story is, and it's really bold given it's a regeneration story.
Yeah.
Where you think, being a regeneration story, the Doctor will be front and center, because when you look at something like, say, Logopolis, the Doctor is really involved. He's in almost every scene. It's really a story about him struggling. It's his... Logopolis is a really big story for him. Planet of Spiders is a really big story for the Doctor, because they are regeneration stories. They're really focused on the Doctor. When it comes to Caves of Androzani, the focus is totally off the Doctor. It's on all the other characters. And the fact that he regenerates at the end of it is almost incidental. So it's a really brave move.
But I love the whole, like, getting to that point, though, because he's dying, he gets kidnapped by some pirate guys, and then he steals their ship, crash lands it on a planet, sacrifices himself for his companion, and he's like, peace, I'm dead. It's so cool. I love that story.
They just literally stumble into it. It's not... You know what I mean? They're not even meant to be there. He's got no real... All the real machinations, all the evil is going on over on a different planet.
Yeah.
Because it's all about Morgus and him bumping off the president and taking power and everything, and all this drug running and everything that's happening over on Androzani Major. And so you keep cutting across to him in his office, fermenting all his Bond villain type plans. And the Doctor doesn't even know what's going on. He has no awareness of any of it. It's just, he's totally unaware of it all, and he's not even really interested in any of it. All he's interested in is trying to save Perry.
Yeah.
It's just a totally non-typical Doctor Who story. And I think the non-typical Doctor Who stories tend to work really well. What is one of the very best modern era Doctor Who stories in terms of the public perception?
The public perception, I'd say Blink, maybe?
Exactly. And again, it's a story in which the Doctor is a supporting character.
Yeah.
It's like Androzani. Sometimes they don't go well, but it's curious that what is widely regarded as the best classic era Doctor Who stories, Caves of Androzani, and the best modern era Doctor Who stories, Blink, are both ones in which the Doctor doesn't play a major part.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah. It's probably coincidental, but it's a curious fact.
That's actually incredible when you think about it. Huh.
It's playing on the mythos of the Doctor, really. I would say is that he's ends up being more of a fantasy character in these ones where he's very likable.
Maybe it's easier to digest Doctor Who, the character of the Doctor, when he's less dominant in the story. Maybe that makes him more appealing if he's in the background.
Yeah, maybe, because it makes him more mysterious again, like Andrew Cartmel was saying.
Yeah.
Because Andrew Cartmel was like, we need to make the Doctor mysterious because it would make him interesting again.
Yeah. And so the way they do that is they move McCoy's character more into the background. They give Ace more of the role. So it kind of, well, okay, we're following the adventure through Ace running around and getting into the action, but it's actually the Doctor who's manipulating everything from behind the scenes. So that was
I love
style.
McCoy.
Yeah.
So good. McCoy's great. So now that we've gotten the confirmation that we've got Davison as your favorite Doctor, do you have a favorite story and companion?
Oh, so many to choose from. I would say that going back to favorite Doctor, that I say that Peter is my favorite Doctor because that covers both bases. Because Capaldi, I think, is my favorite Doctor from the New Era Doctor Who.
Right, I see.
I think he's fantastic.
Yeah, I love him.
Both Peter Davison and Capaldi I like as actors beyond Doctor Who as well. So I like other stuff they've been in. I'm a huge fan of The Thick of It, which is a political drama that Capaldi is in. And ever since David Tennant was cast, when they were talking about David Tennant being cast, I was starting to go, oh, who should they cast next? And ever since then, I was saying to people, Peter Capaldi would be a brilliant Doctor. And so when he finally got, he got the nod, I was going, this is the first time ever I've correctly picked an actor to be the Doctor. I've never got it right before. You know when you hear there's going to be a new Doctor, and so you kind of go through that speculation thing. Who's it going to be? Who do I think it'll be? You never ever get it right. And this time I did. And it's going, yes! It's the only time it's ever happened to me. So yeah, Capaldi is my favorite modern series Doctor Who Doctor, and Davison's my favorite classic. But I mean, I have huge affection for John Pertwee and Tom Baker because they are the Doctors that I grew up with as a kid. So
I love John Pertwee almost like too much.
Yeah,
I love John Pertwee so much.
They are both Tom Baker and John Pertwee represent this huge heady shot of childhood nostalgia for me. They are just so important to when I got into being a Doctor Who fan that I can't sort of separate them from that sort of, they are the whole mythos of the series, those two Doctors. So they're very important to me in terms of my fandom. But yeah. So the next question you were going to ask me was favorite companion.
Yes.
Can I go for one classic, one modern?
We did that ourselves actually. So yeah, one classic, one modern is the best way to do it.
Okay. modern first of all, Donna Noble.
Yes.
For me, she's one of the most realistic of the modern era companions I've had, in the sense that she reacts the way you would expect someone normally to react.
Yeah.
She's not sort of overly sort of sassy or arch or you know what I mean? Clara and Amy are a bit too cool given the situations they're in. You know what I mean? They're not as entertaining as they are as characters. They're a bit unrealistic, I think, in the sense that they kind of like, oh yeah, I'm hip with this. We're getting blown up and we're running down the corridor, but I've still got some funny quips to say. Whereas Donna Noble is much more sort of, you've got to be kidding me. She's much more real in the way that she reacts to things. She's much more indignant. She's much more sort of just go, she's got, when the Doctor's sort of saying, well, I need you to hit the Sontaran with a hammer, she's going, she reacts like you or I would react. She's going, what? You know what I mean? It's like, she's just, I don't know, I think she just does, Catherine Tate plays it so brilliantly I think she's just great. I have to say, I didn't like her in Runaway Bride. I thought she was too over the top, but ever since she came back, I thought, she's toned it down a bit, and she's really good at playing it really, really well. So yeah, Donna Noble for my companion. Modern series, classic series, it varies a lot. I'm kind of fond of Tegan, but I think I would go for Leela, because Leela, again, one of those companions whom I think was just played ever so brilliantly by Louise Jameson. She just played Leela so realistically and believably that I think just great. So yeah, that's my pick for classic. Story, gosh. modern era story. Oh, that's really difficult. I have to confess, I haven't watched modern era Doctor Who as much as I watched classic era Doctor Who.
Yeah, I'm the same.
I really need to rewatch them more, because I've watched classic era Doctor Who over and over and over again, that I know the stories by heart, but I haven't watched the modern era as much. But I can pick on certain ones. One that is really quite dear to me, and it's not necessarily a one that's widely regarded as a classic, is Vincent and the Doctor,
Ah, yes.
the Van Gogh
Yes.
story. That is just brilliant. That's just fantastic. It's such a powerful story to deal with the whole concept of suicide and depression. And Doctor Who is like, wow, this is really heavy stuff, but so well and sensitively done as well. That's just quite impressive. I love the Paul Cornell two-parter, The Human Nature and Family of Blood. I think they're brilliant.
Yes.
Yes.
Blink, obviously, is great.
Of course.
Yeah. But I'm kind of because I'm giving you lots of options here. With classic era though, there is no doubt about it. I have one favorite story, and that is Warriors Gate. Absolutely brilliant story. I love Warriors Gate. It is my absolute all-time favorite Doctor Who story. Has been for years, and it's just so superbly well written and produced that I can't fault it. So yeah, there we
Wow.
go. That's my pick.
Well, that's incredible. Well, again, thank you so much for your time, Paul. This
My
has
pleasure.
been incredible. Just wow. Thank you very much from both Harriet, Skelly, and I. So thank you everybody for listening. I will have links to Retrospace and a link directly to purchase Paul's book, The Comics Companion, in the description and on the video. Thank you very much for everybody
thank you.
for tuning in.
Thank you.